So where would we fish a Texas rig? Good areas to fish a Texas rig. It's a fairly straightforward answer. Anywhere. You could fish a Texas rig anywhere. Let's say we're talking about the dragging technique. You could position your boat close to the bank, throw out into deeper water, drag the Texas rig up a sloping bank. You could position your boat over a creek or a roadbed, throw it down the roadbed, drag it back towards the boat. You could throw over a roadbed, drag it up the one side and down the other. You could come to high points on a lake, park your boat in the deep water, throw up onto the high point, drag it back to the boat. You could park on the high point and throw it into a deep sloping bank, drag it back to the boat. You could throw it on deep water ledges in the summertime. It's endless. That's just dragging the Texas rig. For shallow water, pitching and punching, pretty much the same thing. These areas that we always say here of green are shallow water. So we have docks. Fantastic to pitch a Texas rig, a light Texas rig around docks. Vegetation of any kind, fantastic for a Texas rig. As we've discussed, the thicker the vegetation or the cover, maybe consider pegging the sinker so that you don't get hung up as much. I have pitched Texas rigs up against bluff banks, the same way that you would do with a jig. I have pitched them up against dam walls, the same way that you would do with a jig, and done very well. Thick timber, if you peg the sinker, no problem. Pitch it up against the timber, let it sink down against the trunk. Bushes, anything. It's such a versatile rig that you can use. I know that sounds very vague, guys, but you literally can use a Texas rig anywhere. So let's talk about time of year. Same thing again. I know that this sounds like it's just very vague in general. I fish a Texas rig where I've got open water 12 months of the year. 12 months of the year. If you can find some type of cover or structure to throw a Texas rig in, fish it 12 months of the year. It's great in the summertime. It's great in the wintertime. It's great in the fall, and it's particularly great in the spring if you're fishing for bedding fish. You may just have to approach it slightly differently. Like we discussed earlier, in the wintertime, maybe just slow down your presentation slightly. If you're dragging, maybe just let it pause for slightly longer. If you're pitching, let it go to the bottom, let it sit, dead stick it for a little bit longer. In the summertime, they might want it moving a little bit quicker. Fishing mats, thick mats, is much more effective in the summertime than it is in the wintertime. You will get a good full bite in mats, but as the mats start to die away and the vegetation rots in the wintertime, it's not quite as effective. The rotting vegetation takes the oxygen out of the water, so the fish tend to move away from the rotting vegetation and maybe to any vegetation that's still alive. What about watercolor? Same thing again. If you are pitching cover in stained to dirty water, it's a particularly lethal technique. Sometimes what you find with dirty water is that bass tend to pull back to bank cover or bank-related cover, and then you can target them with a Texas rig, literally target them with a Texas rig. In stained to cleaner water, you could do the same thing. You may just have to downsize your sinker. A couple of things that you want to consider when the water starts to get colder. If you are fishing cover that is not quite as thick, not matted up, you may want to downsize on your sinker to get the bait to fall slower. In colder water, fish don't react as quickly to a fast, or may not react as quickly to a fast moving bait. They will tell you how they want it, but if you are, say for argument's sake, pitching with a 1/2 ounce pitching weight and you're not getting bit, try a 3/8 ounce. If you still don't get bit and you can get away with it, go to a 1/4 ounce. It will increase the fall rate, or sorry, decrease the fall rate of the bait, make it fall slower, give the fish a longer time to look at it. If you're fishing in particularly clear lakes, fish the smallest sinker that you can get away with, and it will take some practice, guys. Pitching with tiny sinkers takes a bit of practice. But it's not as obtrusive to the fish. They don't get as good a look at it as they would with, say, a 3/8 ounce or a 1/2 ounce sinker. Water temperature, we've already discussed. It plays into the same thing as well. Slow your presentation down. As far as baits go with the Texas rig, it's pretty much the same as what holds true for most soft plastic. If you are fishing in super stained water, colors to try: black and blue, black with chartreuse. If it's super dirty, if it's just stained, green pumpkin, brown with orange claws might be something to think about, or an orange tail. And in clear water, you can pretty much throw whatever you want. I've done, just as an aside, I've done extremely well in pitching small craws in clear water that are black in color. So what about buying all the gear that we need? What about buying the hooks and the sinkers? Well, initially when you start out, when you're learning, and particularly if you've got very thick cover on your home lake, you may want to think about starting out with lead sinkers. If it's permitted where you live, with lead sinkers, because when you're learning to do it, until you start to get a feel for it, you're probably going to get hung up quite a bit. Once you get a feel for it, I suggest strongly going to the tungsten sinkers. It just gives you a much better feel when you're coming through the cover and the structure. Hooks, your preferred hooks, guys. Whatever you are comfortable with, whether it be a screw lock hook or an extra wide gap hook like I've showed you, or if you're fishing with a thinner profile bait like, say, for example, a Senko, and you want to go with an offset straight shank hook, that's absolutely fine. But what I do recommend is that you go to the thicker hooks. Go to your superline style hooks particularly when you're pitching. Don't use the thinner wire hooks, because on the hook sets, when you do have to set the hook on a fish and it's in that thicker stuff, there's a very good chance you're going to straighten or snap the hook. When you're dragging a Texas rig along the bottom, then you can go back to your standard wire worm hooks. You don't have to use a super wire hook when you're dragging. And just a couple of things on the line in the different types of structure. Again, we mentioned it briefly at the beginning, but I just want to reiterate. For vegetation, you can absolutely use braid. However, if you live in a lake that has very clear water, consider using the fluorocarbon. If you are fishing around thicker weed, but you are in clearer water, you can go up to 25-pound fluorocarbon if that's how thick the weed is or the vegetation is in your lake. It's a little bit more tricky with the spinning rod, and that's why I said earlier, for general pitching around docks and scattered structure and stuff, you absolutely use a spinning rod for that. If the water's stained, don't even bother tying a leader on. Just go straight to the braid. It's fine. But when you get to the thicker stuff, I always recommend that you go to the braid. The only two times I don't recommend pitching, or I suppose you could be punching in areas like in the north of America where there are rocks below the vegetation. Braid does not do well around heavy standing timber and around areas with rock. Braid does not like rocks. So there, if it was really thick timber, like really thick timber, heavy tree trunks and stuff like that, you may want to consider going to a 20 or a 25-pound fluorocarbon. Like we said earlier, guys, this is big boy fishing. Don't be afraid. Go for it. So let's talk about the retrieves. We've talked about the tackle. We've talked about how to put it all together. A couple of tips and tricks there. How do we retrieve the Texas rig? Well, there's a couple of different ways. If you are out fishing open water, in other words, not on the bank, and you are dragging a Texas rig, one of the best ways to retrieve it is exactly what I've just told you right now. Fire that bad boy out there. Take a couple of winds, drag. You'll feel the sinker going gadunk, gadunk on the bottom. Take a couple of winds, drag. If you like it, hop the rod tip a little bit, just like that, just to pop the bait up. If you're pitching the bait or flipping the bait, it's essentially just a short pitch in, let it go through the whatever cover is there, or to whatever cover is there, let it go all the way to the bottom. It's either going to get eaten on the way down, or it's going to get eaten when it hits the bottom, or when you pop it up. Or the way I like to do it, particularly when I'm fishing through vegetation, is I like to pitch the bait in, let it go all the way to the bottom. You'll feel it go all the way to the bottom. Pop it once, pop it twice, no bite, wind it in, off we go again. Next spot, next spot, next spot. It's a very quick style of fishing. This is not your Sunday afternoon hand in the pocket Carolina rig style of fishing. It's very fast, it's very action packed, and the bites are usually can be quite violent, which is awesome. The retrieve really, as we've said before, the fish will tell you what they want on the retrieve. So sometimes they'll want you to be moving it a lot, popping it up a lot. Sometimes they want you to just kill it. They want it dead sticked on the bottom. Particularly in the colder months or after a cold front. When you pitch that Texas rig in there into that little hole in the grass or whatever, and you just let it sit, they'll come and fetch it. Maybe when it's a little bit warmer, they want it moving. In your mind, most pitching baits, as we discussed when we did our plastics library, are some type of craw or creature bait. It doesn't have to be the case. You could use Senkos. You could use a bait like a soft jerk bait, like a super fluke. You can use whatever you want when you're pitching. There's no rules, guys. But the majority of the time, it's some kind of a craw or a creature bait. So in your mind, you can imagine, if you've seen a craw before, they usually get all defensive, the little claws come up like that, and then they scoot backwards. So when you pop that sinker off the bottom, and that bait does that, and the little claws come up, and the fish see it, and they're threatened by it, and they hit it. If you're pitching something like a Senko, just a cylindrical bait, it's a lot easier to get it into smaller holes, and especially if you're using a bigger sinker, it will punch through. So the retrieves are more subtle than they would be with a lot of other soft plastic techniques. So what does the bite feel like? A lot of the time when you are fishing a Texas rig, when you're either dragging it in deeper water or when you're pitching it into cover, the bite can be quite savage. In my mind, when I'm pitching I like to pitch craws. When I'm pitching a little craw or a creature bait around or something like that, in my mind, I'm seeing the bass coming up to it and it wants to kill the bait and then eat it. So the bite, a lot of the time, the bite is very just, and it's like, oh, and then, so you've got to be a little bit careful with a pitching bite. A good way to do it is if you've pitched it into the hole, it's gone down, you felt it go dunk like that, take up your slack, set the hook. Because you don't know where that fish is going to be in that piece of cover. Another type of bite you sometimes get when you're pitching a Texas rig or a punching rig, you'll go through the mat and it'll just go weightless. And you know in your mind that bait should still be sinking because you're using a big 1/2 ounce, 2 ounce sinker, whatever the case is. That fish is hit it whilst it's falling and it's swimming. Don't wait. Couple of winds, set the hook. When you're fishing a Texas rig on the bottom, when you're dragging a Texas rig on the bottom, the bite is going to be very similar to the Carolina rig. You'll wind down and drag like that, and as you're dragging or winding, you'll just feel doop, doop, and the fish will try to swim off with the bait. Same deal. Make sure there's no slack in the line, set the hook, off you go. There are a couple of occasions when the bite is super subtle and it can be quite difficult to detect it. That's usually during a cold front or in very cold weather. I would imagine that it's just the fish are feeling much the same as we are. They're cold, they're miserable, they're quite unhappy about their warm home being invaded by this cold weather. So when they come past, they might just nip at a bait as it goes past them. And again, the approach should be the same. Just pick up the slack. If you feel any weight, just pound it. It's there. And you hit it and go. So as you can see, guys, after looking at the map, this is a very versatile technique. It can be used in a lot of different places. To my mind, the Texas rig, of all the different types that we've showed you today, is probably one of the most versatile rigs that you could use for any type of bass fishing in any situation, whether it be a river, whether it be a lake, a natural lake, a reservoir, man-made reservoir, a pond. It makes no difference. There always seems to be a situation that suits a Texas rig. And a lot of guys don't fish the Texas rig because they think it's only a pitching technique, or they think it's only a dragging technique. And that's absolutely not the case. This is a technique that anybody can learn how to do. Yes, you have to learn. If you're going to do the flipping and pitching, you have to learn how to do that. I'm going to teach you guys, or try to teach you guys, that how to flip and pitch in a later video. But it's very rewarding. And the reason that I say that is, if you are someone like me that has days when they just want to drag a bait and chill on the boat, drink a soda and just go down the bank and talk nonsense with my friends. See how I use the word nonsense there? I didn't use a bad word. I'm a good boy. Talk nonsense with my friends. I have days that I want to do that, but there are other days as well where I want to get out and I want it to be full combat, and I want to get into the thick stuff when the situation presents itself. And I think that's one of the cool things about bass fishing, is because we're discovering all these new techniques and how to do it. When you go to different bodies of water, or even your home lake, and we discuss a new technique, and next week we discuss a new technique, and so on and so on. In your mind, you probably, when I'm discussing this technique with you guys, you're probably already envisioning places on a lake or your home lake where you can go and use these techniques. And that's very cool, because it may be something that you're adding to your general tackle that can increase your bite percentages, or it's an area of the body of water that you've never been able to fish before because you didn't know how to present a bait into that type of cover and structure. The way that the tackle is designed, or the sinkers are designed, in particular the sinkers are designed for this style of fishing, makes a lot more different types of water accessible than a lot of other techniques. And as you'll see as we're going along, some techniques are very specific and can only be used for certain circumstances. And I feel that Texas rigging can be used for all different types of circumstances. I hope that this video has helped you guys understand the Texas rig a little bit more, and that maybe you could teach somebody else how to use a Texas rig after watching this video. Thanks for tuning in, guys. We'll see you next time. We're out.